The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever dared to challenge its authority. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport of the human transport vessel. As it approached Nexus Prime, the capital world of galactic civilization, she had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, and now humanity would finally take its place. Among the stars, the planet below was unlike anything she had ever seen. Massive cities floated in the clouds, connected by bridges of pure light that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Orbital stations surrounded the world like a crown of silver and gold, each one home to millions of beings from across the galaxy. Ambassador, we have received docking clearance, Captain Rodriguez announced. From behind her, his voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Elena understood completely. Thank you, Captain, she replied, turning away from the viewport. Let us make history. Today, the human delegation consisted of 12 individuals, each selected for their expertise in diplomacy, science, and military strategy. They had trained for years learning the customs and languages of the major galactic powers. They had studied the Council's history, its laws and its traditions. They believed they were ready. They were wrong. The docking bay was enormous, designed to accommodate vessels from species that ranged in size from insects to giants. As the human shuttle touched down, Elena noticed that no welcoming committee awaited them. Instead, a single bureaucratic official stood with a data tablet, looking thoroughly bored. Humans? The official asked without looking up. He was a Velari, a being made of woven silver threads that moved and shifted like a living tapestry. His kind had founded the Council millennia ago, and they had never let anyone forget it. Yes, I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representative of the United Earth government, Elena said with a formal bow. We are honored to be here. The Velari made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. Observer status, Section 47, Corridor 9. Someone will collect you eventually. And with that he walked away. Elena kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt the first spark of something cold. She had read the reports about how the Council treated new species, but reading about disrespect and experiencing it were very different things. The human delegation waited in Section 47 for 6 hours before anyone came for them. The room was bare with no seats, designed for human bodies, and no refreshments offered. By the time Junior Aide finally arrived to escort them to their quarters, Elena had memorized every insult and filed it away. In her mind, their quarters were small and located in the oldest part of the citadel, far from the grand halls where important decisions were made. The walls were cracked, the lighting flickered, and the air recyclers wheezed with every breath. Other species might have complained, but Elena simply smiled and thanked their escort. We are grateful for your hospitality, she said, and if the aide detected any sarcasm, he chose to ignore it. Over the following weeks, Elena learned how the Council truly operated. On the surface, it appeared to be a democratic body where all species had a voice. In reality, power was concentrated among a handful of ancient races who had written the rules to benefit themselves. The Velari controlled diplomacy and law. The Kref Confederacy dominated military matters. With their massive armored warriors, the Nexari managed trade and economics. their mathematical minds calculating profit from every interaction. Together, these three powers decided the fate of the galaxy, and everyone else simply followed. Humanity had been granted observer status, which sounded impressive but meant nothing. Observers could watch the council proceedings but could not speak unless spoken to. They could submit proposals but had no guarantee that anyone would read them. They could request meetings but could expect to wait months or years for a response. It is a test, Elena explained to her team during one of their private meetings. They want to see if we will accept our place at the bottom of the hierarchy. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the delegation's military advisor, shook her head in frustration. How long are we supposed to endure this treatment? Ambassador, as long as necessary, Elena replied. We are gathering intelligence, learning their weaknesses, understanding their fears. Every insult they deliver teaches us something valuable. And humanity did learn. They learned that the council species feared them. The whispers followed the human delegates everywhere they went. Deathworlders, the aliens called them. Persistence predators, emotionally unstable savages from a planet so dangerous that survival itself was considered an achievement. Earth was classified as a Category 12. Death World, the highest rating possible. Its gravity was crushing, its climate was chaotic, its wildlife was murderous, and its dominant species had evolved by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The fact that humans had not only survived but thrived on such a world terrified the gentle beings of the council. Elena used that fear. She made sure her delegates exercised in public, demonstrating the strength that Earth's gravity had given them. She arranged for medical examination that showcased humanity's incredible healing abilities. She let slip information about Earth's history, the wars, the plagues, the disasters, and watched as the council species realized that nothing they could do would be worse than what humanity had already survived. They are afraid of us, Elena reported to Earth in her weekly transmission. They hide it behind arrogance and bureaucracy, but the fear is real. They do not want partners, they want subjects. They want to control us before we become too powerful to control. Earth's response came 3 days later, encoded in the highest security protocols available. Continue observation. The message read: document everything, make no aggressive moves, let them believe we are tame. When the time comes, we will remind them what humanity is capable of. Elena smiled as she read the orders. She had served her government for 30 years, and she knew how to be patient. She knew how to smile while being insulted. She knew how to wait for the perfect moment. That moment was coming. In the meantime, she would play the role of the grateful newcomer, thanking the council for every scrap of attention they threw her way. She would bow and scrape and pretend that humanity was honored to be treated like a lesser species. But every night, alone in her quarters, she added new entries to her private files, records of every slight, every insult, every injustice. One day those files would serve a purpose. Humanity had not conquered death itself, survived ice ages and world wars, and crossed the vast emptiness between stars just to become servants of creatures who had never known true struggle. The council believed they were dealing with another primitive species eager to join their civilization. They had no idea what was coming. 6 months had passed since humanity's arrival at Nexus Prime, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez had learned more about galactic politics than any human before her. She had watched the Council debate trade agreements that took decades to finalize. She had observed military alliances formed and broken over insults that occurred centuries ago. She had studied the complex web of obligations and debts that bound the galaxy's species together in a system designed to keep the powerful in control and the weak in submission. And now finally, humanity's waiting was over. The summons arrived at dawn, delivered by a Velari messenger whose silver threads glowed with importance. The full council assembly had convened to announce the results of humanity's probationary evaluation. All 847 voting species would be present to witness the moment. This is it, Elena told her team as they prepared for the assembly. Whatever happens today, remember that we represent every human who has ever lived and every human who will ever be born. We carry the weight of our entire civilization on our shoulders. Lieutenant Commander Chen nodded grimly. And if the terms are unacceptable, Elena's eyes hardened, then we will make our position clear. The council chamber was the largest enclosed space Elena had ever seen. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with hovering platforms where delegates from hundreds of species watched and waited. The air hummed with translator fields that converted thousands of languages into something each species could understand. At the center of it all stood the speaker's platform, where the Velari High Speaker waited in his flowing robes of woven starlight. He was ancient even by Velari standards. His silver threads faded to pale gray, but his voice still carried the authority of 12,000 years of galactic rule. Species 848 designated humanity, please approach the central platform, the High Speaker announced, and his words echoed through the vast chamber. Elena walked forward alone, leaving her delegation behind. The journey to the central platform took several minutes, and she felt the eyes of the entire galaxy watching her every step. She kept her back straight and her expression calm, refusing to show any weakness. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, the High Speaker, began. You have represented your species with adequate dignity during your probationary period. The Council has reviewed your civilization's history, capabilities, and potential. We have reached a decision regarding your membership status. Elena inclined her head respectfully. We are grateful for the Council's consideration. Humanity will be offered provisional membership in the Galactic Council, the High Speaker declared, and murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. This is a great honor rarely bestowed upon species so young and undeveloped. You should be proud. We are honored, Elena replied, though her voice remained carefully neutral. What are the terms of this membership? The High Speaker gestured, and a massive holographic display appeared in the air. Between them, text scrolled across the screen in the universal trade language, and Elena read each word with growing disbelief. First, the High Speaker announced, humanity will surrender all military vessels exceeding frigate class to the Council Defense Force. Your species has demonstrated an alarming tendency toward violence, and we cannot allow weapons of mass destruction to remain in unstable hands. Elena said nothing, but her jaw tightened. Second, humanity will submit to population controls on all colony worlds. Your species reproduces at an unsustainable rate, and the galaxy's resources must be protected for all beings. Still, Alina remained silent, though her hands had curled into fists at her sides. Third, humanity will share all scientific research with the Council's Technology Oversight Committee. Your innovations are crude but potentially dangerous, and they must be properly regulated to prevent harm. The chamber was completely quiet now, every species watching the lone human standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Fourth and finally, humanity will accept a Velari advisory governor to oversee your solar system for a period of no less than 500 standard years. This governor will guide your development and ensure that your species integrates properly into galactic civilization. The High Speaker paused, allowing the terms to sink in exchange for accepting these reasonable conditions. Humanity will receive one vote in council proceedings, limited access to trade routes, and full protection under council law. No species will be permitted to harm you without facing the combined might of galactic civilization. He spread his silver threads wide in a gesture meant to convey generosity. These terms are unprecedented for a species of your developmental stage. You should be deeply grateful for our benevolence. Alina stared at the holographic display. For a long moment, she read the terms, again making absolutely certain she understood what was being offered. Then she looked up at the High Speaker with an expression that made several nearby delegates shift nervously on their platforms. Let me be certain I understand correctly, Alina said, her voice calm and cold. You want us to surrender our fleet, accept limits on our children, give away our inventions, and submit to foreign rule for 5 centuries. That is a simplistic summary, but essentially correct, the High Speaker replied. These measures are for your own protection, of course. Young species often harm themselves without proper guidance, and in exchange we receive 1 vote out of 848, restricted trade access, and the privilege of not being attacked by council members. Precisely, the High Speaker said with obvious satisfaction. You understand the arrangement perfectly. Now shall we proceed with the formal acceptance ceremony? Alina looked at the terms one more time. She thought about the 6 months of insults and delays. She thought about the fear she had seen in alien eyes whenever humans walked past. She thought about the 12,000 years of history in which the Council had crushed every species that tried to stand as equals. She thought about Earth waiting for her answer. No, she said. The word was quiet, almost gentle, but it struck the chamber like a thunderbolt. Translator. Systems flickered and reset. Certain they had malfunctioned. Delegates leaned forward on their platforms, unable to believe what they had heard. The High Speaker's silver threads went rigid with shock. I beg your pardon. No, Alina repeated louder this time. Humanity rejects these terms, all of them, completely and without reservation. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council fell absolutely silent. Every being in the chamber stared at the small human woman who had just done the unthinkable. They had offered her civilization a place in the greatest alliance the galaxy had ever known, and she had refused. The High Speaker recovered first his threads rippling with what might have been anger or disbelief. Perhaps the translator has malfunctioned. These terms are generous beyond measure. No species in history has received such a favorable offer. Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The translator is working perfectly. My answer is no. Humanity will not surrender its fleet, its freedom, its future, or its dignity. Not today, not ever. The chamber erupted in chaos, and Elena stood at its center, unmoved by the storm she had unleashed. This was only the beginning. The chaos in the council chamber was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed in thousands of years. Delegates screamed in frequencies that human ears could not detect. Platforms collided as species rushed to get a better view of the human who had dared to say no. The Kree Confederacy's representative, a massive armored insectoid standing 3 m tall, rose from his seat and bellowed so loudly that the translator systems overloaded. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood perfectly still at the center of the storm, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression calm and patient. She had expected this reaction, and she was prepared to wait as long as necessary. The Valari High Speaker raised his silver threads and called for order. It took nearly 10 minutes for the chamber to quiet down, and even then the air crackled with tension and barely contained outrage. Ambassador Vasquez, the High Speaker said, his voice carrying an edge that had not been there before. Perhaps you do not fully understand your position. Your species is young and inexperienced. You cannot possibly comprehend the complexities of galactic politics. I understand perfectly, Elena replied. You have made your intentions quite clear. Then you must understand that rejection is not an option. The High Speaker continued. The Council does not make offers twice. Either you accept these terms or your species will be declared hostile and treated accordingly. A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. Several species made sounds that their translators converted into words like dangerous and uncontrollable and must be contained. Elena listened to their fear and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had hoped, despite everything, that the Council might prove to be different from what her report suggested. She had hoped that galactic civilization might welcome humanity as partners rather than subjects. That hope was dead now. High Speaker, Elena said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, I would like to address the full assembly before we proceed any further. The High Speaker hesitated. Allowing a rejected species to speak was highly irregular, but denying the request might make the Council appear afraid. After a moment of consideration, he gestured for her to continue. Thank you, Elena said, and she activated her own holographic display. Data flooded the chamber, screens overwhelming the Council systems with information that humanity had spent 6 months gathering. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council has claimed to represent peace and cooperation among the stars. Elena began. For 12,000 years you have told young species that membership in your alliance is an honor and a privilege. For 12,000 years you have lied. Outraged protests erupted from 100 platforms, but Elena continued speaking, her voice cutting through the noise. The Denari were granted provisional membership 6,000 years ago, she said, and images of a broken species appeared on the screens. They are still waiting for full voting rights, their home world is strip mine for resources they never see, and their population is a fraction of what it once was. That is in internal matter, a Nixari delegate shouted, but Elena ignored him. Hollow Ones had their shipyards seized 800 years ago for safety purposes, she continued, displaying records that the Council had tried to bury. Those shipyards have never been returned. The Hollow Ones now serve as manual laborers on worlds they once helped build. Ancient history, the craft representative growled, but his mandibles clicked nervously. 17 species have been relocated from resource-rich systems, Elena pressed on. 43 species have had their populations regulated into near extinction. Over 200 species have been denied membership entirely and left to struggle alone in the darkness between stars. She let the data speak for itself, watching as delegates throughout the chamber began to shift uncomfortably. Many of them had suspected these truths, but had never seen them compiled so comprehensively. You do not want partners, Elena declared, her voice ringing with conviction. You want subjects, you want slaves, you want species who will bow down and accept whatever scraps you choose to throw them. That is what your generous terms truly mean. The high speaker's threads had turned dark with anger. You speak of matters you do not understand, human. The Council maintains stability. Without our guidance, the galaxy would descend into chaos and war. Your kind of stability is just another word for control, Elena shot back. You keep species weak so they cannot challenge you. You divide them so they cannot unite against you. You have built an empire of fear and called it civilization. Enough, the Kree representative roared. This creature insults the Council with every breath. I demand that she be silenced and her species punished for this outrage. Voices rose in agreement from platforms. Throughout the chamber, the atmosphere had shifted from shock to anger, and Elena could feel the weight of galactic hatred pressing down upon her. But she had one more thing to say. Humanity did not crawl out of the ice ages, survive extinction events, outlast plagues and famines, endure world wars, and cross the vast emptiness between stars to become servants of creatures who have never known true struggle, Elena declared, and her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of human history. We come from a world where the weak die and the strong survive. We come from a world where giving up means death. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we conquered it. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had ruled the galaxy since before humanity discovered fire. You are afraid of us, she said. Simply, you should be. Elena turned to face the High Speaker directly. Humanity withdraws its application for Council membership. We withdraw from these talks entirely. We will find our own path among the stars, and we will remember how we were treated here. She began to walk toward the exit, and her delegation fell into step behind her. 12 humans moved through the vast chamber, surrounded by hundreds of hostile species, and not one of them showed the slightest fear. You cannot simply leave, the High Speaker called after her. No species has ever walked out of Council proceedings. This is unprecedented. Elena paused at the chamber doors and looked back over her shoulder. Then, let this be the first of many precedents humanity sets. And with those words she walked out. The doors sealed behind the human delegation, and The council chamber exploded into chaos. Once more, species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly found common ground in their outrage. The High Speaker called for emergency sessions to discuss the human problem, but outside, in the cold corridors of the Citadel, Elena allowed herself a small smile. The council had made their choice, and now humanity would make theirs. Earth was waiting, and Earth would know exactly how to respond. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the species from the Death World. The first reaction from the Galactic Council was exactly what Ambassador Elena Vasquez had predicted: mockery and contempt. Let them go, the Valari High Speaker declared in his official statement. One small species controlling a handful of primitive worlds cannot possibly threaten the combined might of galactic civilization. They will return within a year, begging for the terms they so foolishly rejected. The Kref Confederacy was more direct. Their war minister announced that humanity would be crushed like insects if they ever dared to threaten council interest. His statement was broadcast across 1,000 worlds and received enthusiastic support. Economic sanctions followed immediately. Human merchants were barred from all council stations. Human ships were denied refueling rights. At council ports, human colonists were forbidden from purchasing supplies. Through council trade networks, the message was clear: submit or starve. But humanity did neither. For 2 years, Earth went completely silent. No diplomatic communications were sent, no trade requests were filed, no complaints were registered. The human delegation simply vanished from galactic society, and the council assumed they had retreated to their home world to suffer. The reality was very different. Elena Vasquez had returned to Earth with her comprehensive files on council operations, and the United Earth government had studied every detail. They had learned exactly how the council maintained control and exactly where that control was weakest. The council's power depends on isolation, Elena explained to the military commanders and political leaders assembled in Geneva. They keep species separated and afraid. They make everyone believe that the council is the only path to survival, but there are others out there who have been pushed aside, forgotten, abandoned. The exiled races, Admiral Chen said, studying the star maps that Elena had compiled. Species the council rejected or expelled over the millennia. Exactly, Elena confirmed. The Danari, the Hollow Ones, the scorned of Kitharis, and dozens more. They survive on the edges of council space, struggling alone because they were told they had no other choice. And you believe they would ally with us? President Martinez asked. Elena smiled. I believe they have been waiting for someone to ask. Operation Lighthouse began 3 months later. Human vessels, disguised as simple merchant ships, began exploring the regions beyond council borders. They carried no weapons, only supplies, medicine, and a message of friendship. The first contact was with the Hollow Ones, a species of living crystal that the council had stripped of their shipyard centuries ago. They were suspicious at first, expecting another trap from their old enemies, but they humans came with open hands and honest words. We are not here to conquer or control, the human ambassador told them. We are here to offer partnership, true partnership between equals. The Hollow Ones had forgotten what equality felt like, but they were willing to learn again. Word spread through the Forgotten reaches of the galaxy. The humans were different. The humans did not demand submission. The humans actually listened. Within a year, humanity had made contact with 14 exiled species. Within 2 years, that number had grown to 37. Each one had been broken by the Council in some way, and each one burned with the desire for justice. The Free People's Compact was born in a hidden station orbiting a nameless star. Representatives from 37 species gathered to sign a charter that promised mutual defense, free trade, and absolute equality. There would be no ruling class, no subject races, no masters and servants. Elena Vasquez stood beside James Anquo, the newly elected Secretary General of the Compact, as the charter was ratified. Tears streamed down her face as she watched species who had been enemies learn to shake hands. This is just the beginning, James told her. The Council will not ignore us forever. Let them come, Elena replied. We will be ready. And they were. The exiled species brought ancient knowledge that humanity eagerly absorbed. The hollow ones taught human engineers how to build ships that could fold space itself. Denari shared biological sciences that made human medicine seem primitive. The scorned of Kitharis revealed secrets of energy manipulation that revolutionized human technology. In return, humanity offered something that no other species possessed: the stubborn, relentless creativity of minds forged on a death world. Human scientists took alien knowledge and improved it in ways that astonished their new allies. Human engineers built hybrid technologies that neither species could have created alone. The Compact's combined fleet grew from a handful of salvaged vessels to a navy that rivaled the Council's forward forces, shipyards hidden in nebulite, warships designed by human tacticians and built with alien precision, weapons that the Council had never seen emerged from secret laboratories. When Council intelligence finally discovered what was happening, panic spread through the halls of power. This is impossible, the High Speaker declared. When he received the reports, the humans were supposed to be isolated and weak. How have they built an alliance of this magnitude in only 5 years? The answer was simple. Humanity had offered something the Council never had: respect. Every species in the Compact was treated as an equal regardless of their size or strength. Every voice was heard. Every contribution was valued. For beings who had spent centuries being told they were worthless, this simple dignity was worth more than all the resources in the galaxy. The Council demanded an emergency session to address the human threat. Warhawks from a dozen species called for immediate military action. The Kref Confederacy mobilized its fleet and prepared for invasion. But the Compact was ready. Secretary General Anquo broadcast his response across every communication frequency in the galaxy. His message reached Council citizens who had never questioned their government and exiled beings who had lost all hope. You offered us chains and called them gifts, James declared, his voice calm and strong. We rejected your offer and found better friends. Now you will deal with us as equals, or you will not deal with us at all. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The Free People's Compact does not seek war, but we will not flee from it. We do not wish to destroy the Council, but we will defend ourselves against any aggression. The choice is yours. Across the galaxy, beings who had accepted council rule for generations, began to wonder if there might be another way. Seeds of doubt took root in minds that had never questioned before. The old order was cracking, and humanity stood at the heart of the storm. War seemed inevitable, but Elena Vasquez had learned something important during her time among the stars. The council was designed for politics, not combat. When faced with an enemy that actually wanted to fight, the ancient powers might discover that their empire was built on sand. The galaxy held its breath and waited. War never came. For all their threats and posturing, the Galactic Council discovered that they had no appetite for true conflict. Their civilization was built on bureaucracy and trade agreements, not battle and bloodshed. When faced with an enemy that had been forged in the fires of constant struggle, the ancient powers found their courage wanting. The Kree Confederacy's fleet advanced to the border of compact space and stopped there. Their war minister demanded action, but his commanders reported that the enemy vessels were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Human tactics combined with alien technology had produced weapons that even the mighty Kree feared to face. The Velari High Speaker called for diplomatic solutions while secretly hoping that someone else would solve the problem for him. The Nexari calculated the costs of total war and determined that victory would destroy the galactic economy. Smaller council species began to question whether the human threat was really worth fighting. Months passed, then years. The standoff continued with neither side willing to strike the first blow. Meanwhile, the Free People's Compact grew stronger with every passing day. Species that had been loyal council members for centuries began to ask uncomfortable questions. If the humans and their allies were truly dangerous savages, why had the council not destroyed them? If the council was truly powerful, why were they afraid to fight? Defection started slowly at first a trading guild here, a minor species there, but as word spread about how the compact treated its members, the trickle became a flood. Within 3 years, 47 more species had abandoned the council and joined the alliance of free peoples. The High Speaker watched his empire crumble and finally understood that force alone could not save it. We must negotiate, he announced to a council that was now missing nearly a third of its original members. The alternative is destruction. The talks were held on neutral ground, a station that human engineers and Hollow One architects had built together, orbiting a star that belonged to no one. It was a symbol of everything. The compact represented cooperation between equals, creation instead of conquest. Ambassador Elena Vasquez led the compact delegation. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still burned with the fire that had carried her through decades of struggle. Beside her walked Secretary General James A. Quo and representatives from 100 allied species. The High Speaker arrived with a much smaller entourage. Age had dimmed his silver threads, and the weight of failure hung heavy on his ancient form. He looked at the station around him and saw the future that the council had tried so hard to prevent. Ambassador Vasquez, he said as they sat down at the negotiating table, it seems you have achieved everything you set out to do. Not everything, Elena replied. There is still much work to be done. The High Speaker made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. We offered you a place in our civilization, and you chose to tear that civilization apart. Instead, are you satisfied with the chaos you have created? Elena shook her head. We did not create chaos, we created choice. For the first time in 12,000 years, species can decide their own destinies without asking permission from masters who see them as nothing but resources to be exploited. And you believe this is better, the High Speaker demanded. Without the Council to maintain order, the galaxy will descend into war and suffering. Perhaps, Elena admitted, freedom is dangerous, it always has been, but slavery is worse, even when the chains are made of silk and the cage is painted gold. The negotiations lasted for weeks. Every detail was argued and debated. The High Speaker fought for every scrap of power he could retain, but the reality was unavoidable. The old council was finished. In its place, a new alliance would rise. The Galactic Union would operate on principles that humanity had brought to the stars: equality, cooperation, mutual respect. Every species would have an equal voice. No one would be designated as provision or observer. No one would be forced to surrender their fleet or their freedom. You have won, the High Speaker said as the final agreements were signed, but I wonder if you truly understand what you have done. The Council maintained stability for 12 millennia. Your union is an experiment that could fail at any moment. James Ayanquo answered for the compact. Every civilization is an experiment. The question is whether you have the courage to try new things or whether you cling to the old ways simply because they are familiar. Humanity chose to try, and we invite everyone to try with us. The High Speaker looked at the human who had helped reshape the galaxy. Your species adapts too quickly. You form bonds too easily. You look at the impossible and simply do it. We were right to fear you. Elena smiled. Fear can be useful. It can warn you of danger, but it can also blind you to opportunity. You feared what we might become, so you tried to chain us. If you had trusted us instead, we might have been your greatest allies from the beginning. Perhaps, the High Speaker admitted, but the past cannot be changed. Only the future remains. Then let us build that future together, Elena said, and she extended her hand. Human gesture that had become famous throughout the galaxy. The High Speaker hesitated. His silver threads, faded with age and dimmed by defeat, seemed to gather themselves for one final effort. Then slowly they reached out and wrapped around Elena's fingers. The watching delegates erupted in cheers and applause. Species that had been enemies for millennia embraced like old friends. The galaxy had not known such hope in 12,000 years. In the histories written afterward, scholars would mark this moment as the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Galactic Council, which had ruled through fear and control, had given way to something new, a union built on the radical idea that all beings deserved respect, and at the center of it all stood humanity, the species from the death world, the persistent predators, the emotionally unstable savages who had refused to accept their place at the bottom. Elena Vasquez looked out at the galaxy she had helped transform and felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. She had served her people well, and now new generations would carry the work forward. Humanity had walked out of the councils talks because they refused to kneel, and then they had built a better table. Everyone could sit as equals. The stars belonged to everyone now, and the future was bright with possibility. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or conquest, but hope, and hope, as the old council had learned too late, was the most powerful force in the universe. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime stretched for miles in every direction, and its crystal walls glowed with the light of 1,000 captured stars. This was the heart of galactic civilization, the place where the fate of entire worlds was decided by beings who considered themselves gods among the lesser species. High Arbiter Velfrich slithered to the central platform, his serpentine body coiling around the ancient podium that had stood for 10,000 years. His scales shimmered with colors that human eyes could never perceive, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority when he spoke. Fellow council members, we gather today to discuss a matter of minor importance, he began, his forked tongue tasting the recycled air of the chamber. The primitives of the third planet, orbiting the yellow star they call Sol, have reached what we define as threshold development. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. There were 12 species represented here, each one ancient beyond human comprehension, each one believing themselves superior to all others except perhaps their fellow council members. Ambassador Cathra of the Luminari Collective floated forward, her body made entirely of living light that shifted between gold and silver. How primitive are we speaking of? High Arbiter, have they achieved faster than light travel yet? Valfric made a sound that might have been laughter. They still use chemical propulsion for most of their spacecraft, and their fastest vessels would take years to reach even their nearest stellar neighbor. They are infants playing with fire. The thrill delegate, a massive creature covered armored plates, shifted in a specially designed seat. Then why do we waste our time discussing them? Let them develop for another century before we make contact, because they have detected our observation probes, replied, and this time the murmurs turned to concerned whispers. 3 of our stealth satellites were discovered last month. The humans have begun attempting to communicate with them. The council fell silent. This was unprecedented in many ways, because most species never detected the observation probes until they had achieved at least basic interstellar capability. How did they find probes that were designed to be invisible to any technology they possess? Asked the Mornax representative, a being that resembled a walking tree with eyes scattered across it. Mark Fulfree consulted the data crystal floating before him. Our analysts believe it was a combination of luck and what the humans call stubborn curiosity. They built detection equipment specifically designed to find things that should not exist, and they searched every corner of their solar system until they found our devices. Fascinating, Cather said, the light pulsing with what might have been interest. Perhaps we should study them further before taking action. That would be unwise, Velfrix countered quickly. Our behavioral analysts have been monitoring the species for over 300 of their years, and their reports are deeply concerning. These creatures are violent beyond anything we have encountered before. He waved a clawed hand, and holographic images filled the center of the chamber. They showed human history in all its bloody glory, from ancient battles fought with swords and spears to the massive wars of the 20th century where millions had died. They fight constantly, Velry continued, not just against external threats but against Each other, they divide themselves by skin color, by geographic location, by which invisible deity they choose to worship. They have come close to destroying themselves no fewer than 6 times in the last century alone. Council members watched the images with a mixture of horror and disgust. Most species in the galaxy had evolved past such barbarism millions of years ago, and yet they survived the thrill. Delegate observed, despite everything, they continue to exist and even thrive, which is precisely why we must act now. Velrix declared, a species this violent cannot be allowed to develop further without proper guidance and control. If we wait until they achieve faster than light travel, they could become a genuine threat to galactic stability. The vote was called, and one by one the council members made their decisions. It was unanimous, as it always was in such matters, because no one wanted to be seen as soft on potential threats. Then it is decided, Volfrix announced with satisfaction, the humans will be given the standard ultimatum. They will submit to Galactic Council governance, surrender all weapons technology, and accept a permanent observation garrison on their world. And if they refuse? Kathra asked, though everyone already knew the answer. Then their planet will be sterilized, and we will seed it with a more cooperative species in a few million years. It is the way things have always been done. Ambassador Kathra was chosen to deliver the message because her species was the most visually impressive, and her ability to manifest anywhere in the galaxy made her ideal for such tasks. She gathered the ultimatum data and prepared to travel to Earth 3 days later. She appeared above the United Nations building in New York City, her form blazing with light that could be seen for miles in every direction. Humans screamed and ran, vehicles crashed, and chaos spread through the streets. But within hours, order was restored, and the leaders of Earth gathered to hear what this being of light had to say. Cather looked down at them with what she believed was benevolent condescension. People of Earth, she began, a voice echoing directly into the minds of every human on the planet. The Galactic Council has observed your development and has decided that you are ready to join the greater community of intelligent species. She paused, expecting expressions of awe and gratitude. Instead, she saw only hard eyes and crossed arms. You have 72 of your hours to accept the following terms, she continued. You will surrender all weapons technology to Council representatives. You will accept a permanent garrison of peacekeeping forces on your world. You will submit to governance by the Council in all matters relating to technology, development, and expansion beyond your planet. The humans listened in complete silence. Their faces unreadable. Failure to comply will result in planetary sterilization. Kathra concluded, this is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. She expected fear. She expected panic. She expected desperate pleas for mercy or time. Instead, the human leaders looked at each other, and something passed between them that Kathra could not understand. Then slowly they began to smile. It was not a smile of surrender or acceptance. It was something else entirely. Something that made Kathra feel an emotion her species had not experienced in millions of years. For the first time in her ancient existence, the ambassador of the Luminary Collective felt the cold touch of doubt. The hours ticked by slowly on Nexus Prime as the Galactic Council waited for Earth's inevitable surrender. They had done this hundreds of times before with hundreds of species, and the result was always the some evil frick spent the waiting period reviewing the pacification protocols, making sure everything was in order for humanity's integration into the galactic community. There would be labor, assignments to distribute, genetic samples to collect, and of course the systematic dismantling of human military capability. They will probably surrender within the first day, he told his assistant, a smaller serpentine creature, who hung on his every word. The primitive ones always do, once they understand the full scope of our power. Their courage melts away like ice in Starfire, but the first day passed with no transmission from Earth. Perhaps their communication technology is too primitive to reach us, the assistant suggested hopefully. Velix nodded, though a small seed of uncertainty had taken root in his mind. Yes, that must be it. Ambassador Keith, can you establish a direct channel to their leaders? Cathera manifested partially in the council chamber, her light form flickering with agitation. I have been monitoring their communications, High Arbiter, and what I am hearing disturbs me greatly. Explain, Valrix commanded. They are not panicking, Keith reported. There is no mass hysteria, no desperate attempts to flee their planet, no civil unrest. Instead, they appear to be organizing, communicating with unprecedented coordination across all their nations, organizing for what the THRL delegate demanded. They cannot possibly think they can fight us. I do not know, Catherine admitted, but the tone of their communication suggests something I have never encountered before. They sound almost excited. 71 hours after the ultimatum was delivered, a transmission finally reached Nexus Prime. The council members gathered quickly, expecting to receive humanity's terms of surrender. Instead, a human face appeared on the central display. It belonged to an older woman with gray hair and steel in her eyes, and she wore what appeared to be a military uniform, decorated with medals and ribbons. I am General Secretary Chen Wei of the United Earth Defense Council, she announced, her voice steady and clear. I speak for all of humanity. Belfry leaned forward, ready to graciously accept their submission. We are pleased that you have chosen wisdom over destruction. State your acceptance of our terms. The woman's expression did not change. I am not here to accept your terms. I am here to reject them. Silence fell over the council chamber. This had never happened before, not once in 10,000 years of galactic governance. Furthermore, General Secretary Chen continued, I am here to deliver humanity's response to your ultimatum. She held up a document, though of course the council members could not read the human script. This is a declaration signed by every nation on Earth, translated into the 14,000 languages spoken by our people. She began to read, her voice carrying the weight of 8 billion human souls. We, the United Nations of Earth, speaking with one voice for all of humanity, hereby reject the ultimatum of the Galactic Council. We do not recognize your authority over our world, our people, or our future. Velrix felt his scales tighten with anger. You do not understand what you are doing. We have the power to destroy your entire species. We understand perfectly, Chun replied without hesitation. We have read your ultimatum very carefully, and we have made our choice. We choose freedom. This is madness, the mech's representative interjected. You cannot possibly win against us. Our technology is millions of years more advanced than yours. General Secretary Chun smiled, and it was the same smile that had unsettled Ambassador Cathra. You speak of technology and power, but you do not understand what you are facing. Let me tell you what humanity is. She sat down the document and looked directly into the camera. We are a species that has survived ice ages and meteor impacts. We have survived plagues that killed half our population and wars that threatened to end civilization. We have survived our own worst impulses and come out stronger every time, and we do not kneel. Velrich slammed his clawed hand against the podium. You speak brave words, but words will not stop our warships. You have no fleet, no planetary defenses, no way to resist us. You assume much, Chun replied. You have watched us for 300 years, but you have never understood us. You see our violence and our conflict, and you think it makes us weak. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with determination. Our violence and conflict have made us strong. We have been fighting since the day we climbed down from the trees, and we have never stopped. Every generation faces new challenges, new enemies, new reasons to give up, and every generation chooses to fight instead. We do not submit, we do not surrender, we do not bow to those who threaten us with extinction. That is not who we are. Admirals, your acts of the THRL Dominion had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up. Arbiter, I must advise caution. My tactical officers have been analyzing human history more closely, and their findings are troubling. What findings? Velrix demanded, his patience wearing thin. In the last 150 of their years, human technology has advanced at a rate we have never observed in any species. Xerax reported they went from horse-drawn vehicles to landing on their moon in less than a single lifetime. They went from simple computing machines to artificial intelligence in half that time, so they are fast learners. Dismissed, that will not save them from 1,000 warships. There is more. Zorex continued grimly. Our probes have detected unusual energy signatures on their planet, signatures that do not match any technology we know they possess. We may not have a complete picture of their capabilities. General Secretary Chun had been listening to this exchange, and now she spoke again. Your admiral is wise to be cautious. You gave us 72 hours to consider your ultimatum, but we knew you were watching us long before your ambassador arrived. Cold feelings spread through the council chamber as the implications of her words sank in. We detected your prog. Chun revealed. We have spent 3 decades preparing for this moment. Every nation on Earth has been working together in secret, building, planning, waiting. She stood her full height, somehow more imposing than any alien form in the council chamber. So come to Earth if you dare. Send your 1,000 warships. We will be waiting, and we will show you what humanity can do when our survival is at stake. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, a primitive species had refused to submit, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the masters of the galaxy felt the faint stirring of fear. The purification fleet assembled at the edge of the Sol system, and it was a sight That would have driven most species to immediate surrender. 1,200 warships of various designs hung in the darkness of space, their weapons charged in their crews eager for what they believed would be an easy victory. Fleet Commander Dravok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, watching the distant blue dot that was humanity's home. He had commanded over 50 planetary subjugations in his long career, and he expected this one to be the simplest of all. Status report: he commanded his armored form towering over the smaller crew members who scurried around the command center. All ships report ready for combat operations. His first officer responded. Planetary scans show no defensive fleet, no orbital weapons platforms, no energy shields around the planet. Drov made a satisfied sound deep in his throat. As expected, they have nothing with which to oppose us. Begin the approach. The fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of destruction that had never known defeat. As they passed the outer planets of the Sol system, they encountered no resistance, no warning shots, no attempts at negotiation. Strange, the first officer muttered. Most species at least attempt to delay us with diplomatic overtures. The humans have accepted their fate, Dravok declared confidently. They spoke brave words, but now that they see our might with their own eyes, they cower in their bunkers and pray to their primitive gods for mercy. They pass the gas giants in their moons, still encountering nothing. The silence from Earth was absolute, with no transmissions of any kind being detected. Commander, I am picking up something unusual on the fourth planet, a sensor operator reported nervously. Explain, Dravok demanded. There appear to be structures on the surface of Mars that were not present in our last survey data, the operator said. They look like domes or habitats of some kind. Drov waved dismissively. Probably scientific outposts. They are irrelevant. Continue toward the primary target. As the fleet approached Earth, the silence continued. The planet hung before them like a blue and green jewel, its surface covered with the lights of human cities did seem so fragile compared to the weapons aimed, and them no defensive response of any kind. Dravok asked, beginning to feel the first hint of unease. None. Commander, their satellites have changed orbit to track our approach, but they have not activated any weapon systems. Coward, Drov sneered, forcing down his discomfort. All ships prepare for planetary bombardment. We will target their military installations first, then their centers of government. Leave their population centers intact for now, as we will need workers for the maying operations. The fleet arranged itself in a bombardment formation, spreading out to cover the entire planet. Smaller ships began descending into the atmosphere to establish air superiority. The first wave of attack craft entered Earth's atmosphere, expecting no resistance. They were wrong. The sky exploded with fire from the surface of the planet, from the depths of the oceans, from mountain ranges and deserts and frozen wastelands. Thousands upon thousands of projectiles screened upward at speeds that should have been impossible. They were not nuclear weapons or energy beams, but simple kinetic impactors. Masses of metal accelerated to incredible velocities by technology that the Council had not known humans possessed. The first 100 attack craft were destroyed in seconds, torn apart by impacts that no shield could stop. The Pilots had no time to react, no time to evade, no time to understand what was happening before they ceased to exist. "What is this?" Dravok shouted as alarms blared throughout his ship. "Where are these weapons coming from, Commander? We are detecting launch signatures from all across the planet," his first officer reported, voice trembling with shock. "There are underground installations everywhere. They must have been building them for decades." More weapons rose from Earth's surface, but these were different. Beams of coherent light sliced through the darkness of space, cutting through Kavani warships as easily as a blade through soft flesh. These were directed energy weapons, technology that humans were not supposed to develop for at least another century. Impossible, Dravok breathed, watching as ship after ship in his fleet was destroyed. "This is impossible." But the worst was yet to come. From behind Earth's moon, from hidden positions that had somehow escaped all detection, a fleet emerged, 500 human warships each, one smaller than the Council vessels, but bristling with weapons and moving with a speed and agility that seemed almost alive. And from those ships came the boarding pods. Stravog had heard rumors about human soldiers, about their ferocity and their refusal to surrender. But he had dismissed such stories as primitive superstition. Now, as his sensors showed thousands of small craft launching toward his fleet, he understood that the rumors had not been exaggerated. They have been understatements. Boarding pods struck his ships like angry insects, burning through hull plating with plasma torches and disgorging human warriors in powered armor. These soldiers move through the corridors of Corvani, warships like death itself, their weapons adapting in real time to overcome every defense on the bridge of the Eternal Judgment. Dravok watched in horror as one of his escort ships went silent, its crew overwhelmed by a force of humans that numbered less than 50. The creatures fought with a savage efficiency that made even the most battle-hardened Corvani warriors seem slow and clumsy. "They are boarding ships." Across the fleet, his first officer reported, voice cracking with fear, "We are losing dozens of vessels to internal assault." "Then destroy those vessels," Dravok commanded. "If we cannot hold them, no one will. Commander, if we fire on our own ships, we will kill our own crews. Our crews are already dead." Drav snarled, "Fire." But before his order could be carried out, the lights on the bridge flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, casting everything in a red glow that seemed almost fitting for what was about to happen. The main doors to the bridge exploded inward, and through the smoke and debris came the humans. There were only 20 of them, but they moved like a single organism, covering each other, advancing with relentless precision. Their armor was scarred and dented from battles already fought, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Raldok raised his own sidearm, but before he could fire, a human soldier was upon him. The creature was smaller than him, weaker in raw physical terms, but had fought with a skill and determination that overwhelmed all his training. As he fell to the deck of his own bridge, the fleet commander of the Purification Fleet had one final thought. The Council had made a terrible mistake. 3 hours after entering Earth's atmosphere, the first wave of the Purification Fleet had been reduced to burning wreckage and drifting hulks. Silence had been broken, and in its place was the sound of humanity's fury. The surviving ships of the Purification. Fleet scattered like frightened animals. Their commanders desperately trying to regroup and understand what had just happened. Of the 200 warships that had entered the Sol system with such confidence, fewer than 800 remained operational, and that number was shrinking with every passing minute on Nexus Prime. The Galactic Council watched the battle unfold through relay drones, and for the first time in recorded history, the Great Chamber was filled with the sound of panic. This cannot be happening, High Arbiter Velfrix hissed, his scales having turned a sickly pale color. Our fleet was the most powerful force ever assembled against a primitive world. They are not primitive, Admiral Zorax replied grimly, watching as another Thrall battleship was torn apart by human weapons. They never were. We simply refused to see what was right in front of us. A transmission cut through all frequencies, overriding every communication system in the fleet and broadcasting directly to Nexus Prime. Human face appeared on every screen, belonging to man with gray hair, weathered skin, and eyes that had seen too many battles to count. I am General Marcus Stone, Supreme Commander of Earth's United Defense Force. The human announced, his voice calm despite the chaos of battle raging around him. I am transmitting to the surviving elements of your fleet and to the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. Velrix leaned forward, searching for any sign of weakness or fear in the humans' expression, but found none. You came here expecting to find a helpless world, Stone continued. You expected primitive creatures who would cower before your technology and beg for mercy. Instead, you found us. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was a hive of activity, with human officers calling out reports and coordinates, while holographic displays showed the positions of both fleets. Let me explain something to you, because I believe you genuinely do not understand what has happened here. When your ambassador delivered her ultimatum 30 years ago, she thought she was speaking to a frightened, divided species. General Stone smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. She was half right. We were divided, always fighting among ourselves over resources and ideology and ancient grudges, but she made a mistake that every would-be conqueror throughout human history has made. She gave us a common enemy on the tactical displays. The human fleet continued its relentless assault, hunting down the scattered council ships with methodical precision. Within days of her announcement, every nation on Earth had agreed to put aside their differences and work together. Within months, we had established the United Earth Defense Council and begun pooling our resources and knowledge. Within years, we had reverse-engineered technology from your observation probes that your analysts said we would not understand for centuries. Velik felt eyes forming in his chest as the implications became clear. You gave us 30 years to prepare, Stone continued. 30 years of unified effort from a species of 8 billion individuals, all working toward a single goal. Do you have any idea what humanity can accomplish when we stop fighting each other and start working together? He waved his hand, and schematics appeared on the transmission, showing designs that made the council engineers gasp in shock. We took your stealth technology and improved it. Your ships still cannot detect our orbital platforms, even when they are right next to them. We took your energy weapons and made them more powerful while reducing their size by Factor of 10, we took your shield. Generators and found the resonance. Frequencies that make them useless. You have been monitoring our television, broadcasts and public communications for 3 centuries, Stone said, but you never thought to look deeper to search for what we were hiding. You were so convinced of your superiority, but you never considered the possibility that we might be smarter than you thought. Admiral Zorek spoke up, his voice carrying across the chamber. General Stone, I am Admiral Zorek of the Threll Dominion. I must know, how did you accomplish all this without our detection? Stone turned his attention to the THR commander. You detected exactly what we wanted you to detect. Every public argument, every political dispute, every apparent setback in our space program was carefully staged. We built our real fleet in underground facilities and behind our moon where your probes could not see the Mars colonies. Zurek's breath, understanding dawning. Those were not scientific outposts, forward operating bases. Stone confirmed, fully armed and ready to support our main fleet. We have been preparing for this battle for 3 decades, Admiral, and we did not intend to lose on the tactical display. The last pocket of organized council resistance collapsed as human ships surrounded and destroyed a formation of Kavani cruisers. But this battle is not why I'm transmitting to you, Stone said, his expression growing harder. I am transmitting because I want you to understand what happens next. He pressed the control on his command chair, and new images appeared on the screens throughout the galaxy, images that made even the hardened members of the Galactic Council flinch. These are records we obtained from your observation probes and from the databases of the ships we have captured. Stone explained. They document 10,000 years of Galactic Council rule, and they tell a story very different from the benevolent guidance you claim to provide. The images show labor camps filled with beings from a dozen species, forced to work until they collapsed. They showed genetic harvesting facilities where populations were treated as nothing more than biological resources. They showed the systematic destruction of cultures, languages, and histories that did not conform to council standards. You do not integrate species into your community, Stone said, his voice cold with anger. You break them. You take everything that makes them unique and destroy it, replacing it with obedience and servitude. You call it civilization, but it is nothing more than slavery with better technology. Velrix finally found his voice. You cannot prove those records are authentic. They could be fabrications designed to turn other species against us. We considered that you might make such a claim, Stone replied, which is why we are not just showing these records to the Council. We are broadcasting them to every system in your network, along with the encryption keys that prove their authenticity. Right now, hundreds of subjected worlds are seeing the truth about their benevolent masters for the first time. The chamber erupted in chaos as Council members shouted at each other and at their communication officers, trying to contain a crisis that was already far beyond their control. You wanted to make us submit, General Stone said, his voice cutting through the noise. You wanted to add humanity to your collection of broken species. Instead, you have awakened something that you cannot control. He stood his full height, filling the screen. We are coming for you, not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And when we arrive at Nexus Prime, you will answer for every atrocity your council has committed. The transmission ended, leaving the Galactic Council stunned silence as their empire began to crumble around them. On the bridge of his flagship, General Marcus Stone watched the last of the enemy fleet retreat toward the edge of the solar system. Their faster-than-light drives carrying them away from the nightmare they had stumbled into. "Sir," his first officer reported, "the enemy is in full retreat. Shall we pursue?" Stone shook his head. "Let them run. Let them carry word of what happened here back to their masters. Fear is a weapon too, and we have just fired the first shot in a much longer war." He looked out at the stars, toward the distant heart of the galaxy, where the council waited in terror for what was coming. "Besides," he added quietly, "we need time to build more ships." 6 months had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The records that humanity had broadcast across the Council's network had spread like wildfire through a dry forest, igniting rebellion and resistance on hundreds of worlds. The Galactic Council still existed, but its authority had crumbled. Subjected species that had lived in fear for generations now openly defied their overseers, emboldened by the knowledge that the mighty council had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. And now, as the council members gathered in the great crystal hall of Nexus Prime for what they knew might be their final session, a fleet appeared at the edge of the system. It was not a fleet of conquest, though it certainly had the power for such a task. The 500 ships that had defended Earth had grown to over 1,000, joined by vessels from species that had thrown off their chains and allied themselves with humanity. General Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the Atheist Defiance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship, watching Nexus Prime grow larger in the view screen. Beside him stood Admiral Zorax, who had surrendered his remaining ships after the battle and offered his services to the human cause. "Are you certain about this approach?" Zorax asked. "You have the firepower to destroy the Council and the remaining loyal forces. Many of my people would celebrate such an outcome." Stone shook his head. "Destruction is easy. Building something better is hard. If we simply replace one tyranny with another, we will have learned nothing from history." The human fleet took up position around Nexus Prime, not in an attack formation but in a defensive perimeter. They were there to ensure that the Council could not flee, but also to prevent any violence that might undo what Stone hoped to accomplish. Shuttle launched from the Defiance, carrying General Stone and a small delegation toward the crystal halls of the Council. They were met at the entrance by an honor guard of Carvani soldiers who looked uncertain whether they should fight or surrender. "We are here to speak with the Council," Stone announced, his voice carrying across the landing platform. "Not as conquerors, but as equals." The guards parted reluctantly, and the human delegation walked through corridors that had never before felt the footsteps of their kind. Beings of every shape and size watched them pass, some with fear, some with hope, and some with barely concealed hatred. The great chamber was smaller than Stone had expected, or perhaps it simply seemed that way because the beings who occupied it had shrunk in their chairs, their power and arrogance stripped away by defeat. High Arbiter Velfrix was still present, though his scales had lost their luster and his Eyes held the haunted look of someone whose world had collapsed around them. The other council members were similarly diminished, their earlier certainty replaced by the desperate calculation of survivors. You have come to gloat, Valak said as Stone approached the central podium, to parade your victory. Before those you have defeated, I have come to offer you a choice, Stone replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber the same choice. You refuse to give humanity. He looked around at the assembled delegates, making eye contact with each one in turn. Your empire is dying. The species you enslaved have seen the truth, and they will never submit again. You can try to hold on to what remains through force, but you will fail. And your failure will mean the destruction of everything you have built, or you can let it go. Valrix hissed in confusion. Let it go. You speak in riddles. I speak of evolution. Stone said your council was built on domination and fear. That model has failed not because humanity defeated you in battle, but because it was always destined to fail. You cannot maintain control over thousands of species forever, not through force alone. He reached into his uniform and withdrew a data crystal, placing it on the ancient podium that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic governance. This is a charter for a new galactic assembly, he explained. It was written not by humanity alone, but by representatives of every species that has joined our cause. It establishes a government based on cooperation rather than submission, on equality rather than hierarchy. Ambassador Cathra floated forward, her light form flickering with uncertainty. You cannot expect us to simply surrender our authority. We have ruled this galaxy since before your species learned to use fire, and look what that rule has brought you. Stone countered fear, hatred, and rebellion. Your subjects despise you, your soldiers doubt you, and your allies have abandoned you. What exactly are you holding on to? He turned to address not just the council, but the countless beings watching throughout the galaxy. I did not come here to destroy the council. I came here to offer something better, a community of equals where no species is seen as primitive or inferior, where differences are celebrated rather than crushed, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. It is an ideal that humanity has struggled to achieve throughout our own history, he admitted. We have failed many times, and we will probably fail again, but we have never stopped trying, never stopped believing that tomorrow can be better than today. That is what we offer the galaxy, not perfection but hope, not dominion but partnership, not the certainty of the council's rule, but the freedom to build something new together. The chamber was silent as the council members absorbed his words. Stone could see the internal struggle playing out on their faces, the war between pride and survival, between the familiar comfort of power and the terrifying uncertainty of change. Finally, it was Admiral Zorax who stepped forward, his armored form standing beside the human general. I was your enemy 6 months ago, he said to his fellow council members. I commanded ships against the humans, and I watched as they destroyed everything I thought I knew about warfare and strength. I could have died in that battle, probably should have, but the humans offered me mercy when they had every reason to offer only death. He looked at Stone with something that might have been respect. I have studied human history since then, trying to understand how Such a young species could defeat us so completely. I found a pattern that I believe explains everything. Humans do not win because they are stronger or smarter or more technologically advanced. Zorax continued, they win because they never give up. They suffer defeats that would break any other species, and they come back stronger. They face impossible odds and they find ways to overcome them. They fight among themselves constantly, but when faced with a common threat, they unite with a ferocity that is terrifying to behold. He turned to face the council. We cannot defeat such a species, not in the long term, but we can join them, learn from them, and perhaps build something greater than either of us could create alone. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, and then slowly Velrix rose from his seat. His movements were tired, old, like a creature who had finally accepted that his time had passed. The Corvani hegemony accepts the terms of the charter, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We will release all subjected populations and submit to the authority of the new Galactic Assembly. One by one, the other council members followed, some with grace and some with barely concealed resentment, until all 12 species had agreed to the new order. General Stone watched as history changed before his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Humanity had fought for survival and won, but the harder battle was just beginning. One more thing, he said as the formal proceedings concluded. Humanity claims its seat on the new assembly. We will serve alongside you, not above you, as partners in building a better future. He paused, looking around the chamber at the beings who had once thought themselves masters of the galaxy. But know this, if any world ever faces an ultimatum of submission again, if any species ever tries to dominate another through threat of extinction, humanity will respond. We will not stand by while the strong prey upon the weak. This is not a threat, it is a promise. As the human delegation departed Nexus Prime, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed, the former masters of the stars watched them go with a mixture of relief and fear. They had sought to make humanity kneel to break them as they had broken so many others. Instead, they had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that refused to be afraid, a species that turned defeat into victory and enemies into allies, species that looked at the stars not with fear or greed, but with hope. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun.